His name's Peter Mayhew, by the way. He gave me beads. Of course. So for the last few years, I all but sacrificed my career to try to help and rebuild New Orleans, and I've struggled to explain what I did and why I did it to everybody I know, and so being overly ambitious, I'll try to do both in 6 minutes. So I'll try to start with history. New Orleans was founded by a private company, and it was intended to be a commercial capital in the New World. It was at the base of the biggest river in North America. It was to be the shipping port that New York City eventually became. And at first, the design worked really well. By 1840, it was the richest and largest city on the Atlantic seaboard. It doubled in size from 1830 to 1838. And it served as the global economic center for sugar and cotton, which, of course, in the early 1800s, sugar and cotton also led to being the center for the slave trade. So when the Civil War came, New Orleans, being a center of commerce, had no real means of defense. And by having no means of defense, it basically conceded in about 3 days. And the slaves were freed, and the city was faced with another problem of massive growth, only this time it was impoverished and racially divided. And very quickly, with what were called freed blacks, which were the freed slaves plus the people that were migrating in from the Caribbean, the city became about 25% white and 75% black. Oh wow, that's really fast. By 1874, New Orleans was host to some of the most brutal acts of racial violence in American history. Blacks were forcefully evicted and entire neighborhoods were regularly gentrified. But by 1910, to accommodate the neighborhoods, the city developed a system of pumps and levees to make construction possible. And black neighborhoods were eventually forced into these areas that were low-lying. And then Canal Street was driven through one of those neighborhoods, creating the lower Ninth Ward, which created this physical barrier as well as racial barrier. Then in the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927, right there, the pumps failed and the government intentionally blew up a levee to flood the neighborhood in order to save the rest of the city. In 65, the city embraced desegregation, and to make a big push in the economy, they made the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet Canal, which failed commercially, but successfully eroded the wetlands, which was the city's primary protection against hurricane forces. So that's the land loss that's happened and projected to still continue happening. And in that same year, as if by fate, Hurricane Betsy arrived and shattered the industrial canal, and the lower Ninth was flooded and destroyed again. That's from Lyndon Johnson's airplane. There's a similar picture was taken of George Bush that you probably saw. So after that, the city's population has been slowly declining. It had slowly declined for the next 40 years. And by 2000, New Orleans, that was once the richest city in America, became the poorest, one of the most crime-ridden, a government layered with corruption, and a rapidly diminishing tax base, which left the city in various states of decay and disrepair. And then, of course, on Monday, August 29th, 2005, the New Orleans levees failed in over 50 locations. 85% of the city was flooded, and it caused over $100 billion in damage, becoming the most expensive natural disaster in American history. So why in the world would we rebuild it is a really valid question that everybody asked at that time. And my answer is because, I really don't have one. I just have one for myself. But I think New Orleans culture holds a secret that I think could really save a lot of humanity. And I say humanity instead of humans because I think of New Orleans as a rich culture that celebrates humanity. And it's a way for us to endure the environmental, social, economic uncertainties that we're all facing to an increasingly larger degree, as our dean just showed us. And we can try to deal with these hardships by sweeping them under the rug, by covering them up, by beautifying them, by trying to pretend they don't exist. But New Orleans, as a contrast, wears it on its sleeve. It shows us its hardships every day. And it doesn't just show them, it celebrates them. It shows us how our differences, our tensions, our hardships, our environmental crises, our economic struggles, they're all beautiful. And when I first went to New Orleans, I felt like I had discovered the key to saving humanity and at the same time was watching it being wiped away from existence. So I felt compelled to do something. So in the summer of 2007, with some help from Architecture for Humanity, quite a bit actually, I started the design studio in the lower Ninth Ward within a nonprofit called NENA to provide pro bono services for returning residents of the lower Ninth Ward. But we had no staff, no resources. We had a little bit of funding. So we knew the only way we could really make this work wasn't to design houses, but to empower the people to do things themselves. So this is one of the first things we did. We established design guidelines, and then we made a universal foundation detail that we developed with the city. We developed it with structural engineers. We knew that if the houses were built with proper foundations before Katrina, the cost to rebuild would be a fraction. It was the foundations that were really built poorly. And then we developed this system of creating construction documents that implemented shape grammar. So we developed chunks of houses in multiples that allowed us to pull them together really fast, create a layout within seconds. And we had enough constants that we were able to do this very quickly. And in the end, we were able to create a full set of construction documents for somebody from start to finish. From the first time we met them to the end of the day, we could do it in less than a day. From there, beyond that, we let residents design themselves, and simply because we had to. We let them choose their own finished materials and colors. They selected their own appliances. They salvaged materials as much as they could. They used communal or volunteer labor. And in the end, what we had created, I can't take authorship of any of it, but yet I feel a part of all of it. And it was the closest thing that I had experienced to that point of a social production or a community-based open source design. So this is an example of one of the CD sets that we'd created. And here are examples of some of the projects that ended up being built. The one second on the bottom to the left was designed by SciArc, so we even had some schools that came in and did volunteer work as well. So in the 6 months I was there, we served 62 households with a staff of 2 and about $30,000 in funding. In comparison to another unnamed project in the neighborhood that raised over $30 million over the past 3 years and has yet to complete a house. And I have no reason to discredit this unnamed project either, but I just want to use it as an illustration of this lesson that we stumbled upon in New Orleans, and it's that I really believe social production can create more meaningful and more massive change than any centralized method of design and production. Even if you're the most famous movie star on earth, you can't compete with it, especially in a culture like New Orleans that celebrates it. Thank you.